Well, hi, and welcome for this second message in our Patrickstory series. We find ourselves somewhere different. The recording didn't work on church and Sunday, so welcome into my home. And we come and we're going to think today a little bit more about what am I made for. Like having a sure sense of self in which you can be secure, it really is a precious possession. A search that begins as we make our way out of being children into adulthood. Maybe when we're younger, we're under the shelter and safety of our parents' care. And then across the teenage years, there's that sense of independence growing, isn't there? That sense of identity. Who am I really? And if we can make our way across those, turbulent waters of raging hormones and wild haircuts and wardrobe choices, if we do reach a safer shore as adults, we might expect a bit of steadiness. And whilst that might come, truth be told, as adults, as we make our way, especially through different transitions and life stages, this question raises itself again. What's my purpose? What am I made for? We can find ourselves looking for security. Chase Rapogel, who is a Christian author, says this: the truth is, to be human, at least an honest one, is to be insecure. We're vulnerable. We live each day in these bodies of flesh, ready to be pierced, popped, and drained of life from an endless line of threats. We're left to worry about everything from the microscopically invisible flesh-eating amoeba to the catastrophic planet-killing asteroid. For all of humanity's advancements, we still worry about weather, disease, war, and hunger. Of course, he says, we're insecure. Humanity is plagued by vulnerability. Now, tad dramatic, yes, and we might feel much safer today than Patrick did in Ireland many years ago, but we're still human. Our life is beyond our control. We're vulnerable. Life can be so uncertain, and it just leaves us with that uncertainty under our feet, that insecurity that affects us when we think about who we are and what we're made for. And even more so today in a changing world where it can feel like the ground is always shifting under our feet, as culturally in recent years there have been a number of rapid changes. Once the Christian worldview offered the fabric and foundations by which we might understand ourselves, but now there's a newfound freedoms, fluidity to understand ourselves how we'd like to, by looking within to our own desires and dreams and hopes. It's to be found inside the meaning to life and our values, not by any outside source. For some, this might feel freeing, but for others, it brings pressure and anxiety because it is on us to be creator. It is on us to make something of our lives, to make meaning. There are so many confusing questions, aren't there, around what it means to be human, even today, everywhere we look, around gender and sexuality, around marriage and family, and even around what it means to be a man and a woman. In terms of Patrickstory, we might say, as we look at the logo, it's just that the Patrickstory is a story of God's, me and us, or the story of spirituality, identity, and community. The questions, who is God really? What was I made for? And where do I belong? And to take away one of these significantly and to say in the secular story that there is no God, well, it's going to affect the other two. In other words, let me ask, might it be because we've left God behind and out of the picture that we've lost the true sense of ourselves and a secure sense of our community? Well, I find it reassuring to know that we're far from the first humans to face shape-shifting times, that Patrick lived through such. At the young age of 16, he was ripped up from his home in Britain and brought to Ireland, and that shift in his life was a sign of his times. As the peaceful Roman Empire was crumbling. A time of insecurity, a time of fear. But remarkably, after gaining freedom and living in Britain, Patrick chose to return to a place that was considered to be wild and dangerous. Where did he find such courage and strength? Well, Patrick had a strong sense of who he was and what he was for. Patrick's story. He was living in a threatening world. If we think we're unsafe today, well, consider Patrick. Every day there's a chance they'll be killed, he says, or surrounded or taken into slavery or some other such happening. Where did the courage to make his life among such dangers come from? Well, we might think it's from himself. He is a mighty man of myth and legend, and yet as we encounter his words, and as we've done that in our life groups the past week, what strikes us is his humility. He owns, honestly, his weakness. He opens with these words, "I am Patrick, a sinner, a plain ordinary person, the least important of all the faithful, contemptible in the eyes of many." And further he continues on, "So I'm a plain ordinary person, a refugee and unlearned. I don't know how to provide for the future." But his strength is found and his purpose is found in what God has done. And in light of who he is, he finds security. "This I know for sure," he continues, "I was humbled. I was like a stone lying in deep mud. And then he who is mighty came, and in his mercy he pulled me out. He lifted me up and he placed me on top of a high wall. That is why I ought to shout aloud in gratitude to the Lord for his great goodness, both in this life and for eternity. Something our human minds cannot fully grasp." Where did his strength come from? From a strong faith in God and a sense of purpose in God's hands. He knew the sacrifice Jesus had made for him, and he responded by surrendering his life, giving himself fully to Jesus as a living sacrifice. He says, "Today I may confidently offer my life as a living sacrifice to Christ my Lord, who has saved me from all my troubles, so that I may also say, 'Who am I, Lord?' or 'What is my calling?' You have appeared to me with such divinity that today among the pagans I can constantly exalt and magnify your name wherever I may be, and not only in good times, but also when under pressure. Therefore, whatever may happen to me, be it good or bad, I should accept it equally and always give thanks to God, who has revealed to me that I should always trust in him fully and forever." And he goes on to say that his purpose is found in being a witness to God. Knowing who God is has helped him to know who he is and what he is for. It might seem strange to us today because we're told that to boost our confidence, we are to dwell on building the positive and to nurture our self-esteem. We are to know and to name our strengths, and well, we just deny or dismiss our weaknesses or any sense of sin in our lives. There's wisdom offered today to say that that old Irish mindset that's humble is actually apologetic. There's a new, bolder, more strident, confident type of being Irish that lives with no regrets and without God in the picture. Yeah, Patrick calls us to a different kind of wisdom, a different way, a confidence that is humble, a strength and security that he experiences vividly in himself, but that comes from outside of himself. It comes from God. Patrick is wonderfully far from any delusions of grandeur and free from any crippling insecurity as well, because he knows his weakness and yet he has found strength in God. Or we might say that he has found his life in the giving away of it. As we consider Jesus' story, that's what we have in the center of Mark's gospel. The turning point of his narrative of Jesus is where Jesus' identity is revealed, we find our own. And particularly in this week of Lent, we consider the journey to the cross. And as Jesus mentions the cross for the first time, it's just after Peter has named his identity. Peter said, "You're the Messiah. You're the Christ of God. You are the strong King." But Jesus then speaks of his suffering and his cross that's coming. And Peter rebukes him. But Jesus says this, he called the crowd to him in Mark 8:34 with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? In other words, the kind of sacrifice and service Jesus will show in dying for sin is the pattern that we're to follow in our lives as well. Life isn't about expressing all my own desires and feelings and passions freely for my own personal fulfillment. No, life is found in denying myself and taking up my cross to follow Jesus. Now let's unpack what that means a little. It doesn't mean saying no to every single desire I have, but it does mean saying no to my reckoning of what's good and what's not. And it means that I rather listen to what Jesus says. And so when there are desires, when there are things in my life that I like and they are going in line with what he loves and desires and sees as good, well, then there's a yes that can come to them. But whenever there are things that he says no to, well, then I say no to those. I deny those desires. And in this, there's a freedom because I give myself to God fully and to serving him and others. And whilst that seems costly, yes, and far from comfortable, indeed it is, but it's in losing our lives like this that we find them. There's joy that is discovered in giving ourselves. It's more blessed to give than to receive. That this shape of living is truly fulfilling and freeing. In last week's question, who is God really, Ross shared some of his life story, and someone responded in the socials this week to say that, look, Ross was really just following his way to personal fulfillment. It was about selfishly seeking emotional happiness rather than pursuing theological truth and who God is. We need to leave our emotions out of it, if you like. We need to reason our way there. There may be some point to that, and yet these two need not compete. If God is truly good, if he is the kind of God who would lay himself down in service of us, this kind of good God will want us to know lasting joy in our lives. So it's possible to know both truth that makes sound sense, but also that satisfies us, surely. But the way to find that is surprising to us. It's in losing ourselves we find life to the full, because it's when we find Jesus that we find who we most securely and surely are and know our purpose. Well, how does this affect our story then? Maybe again, you're someone who is a person of faith and you're inspired by the faith of Patrick. And yet you might find yourself feeling in his shadow quite inadequate and insecure. And yet Patrick encourages us to be honest and humble in our humanity. Professor Crawford Gribben says this: what's most remarkable about Patrick may well be his very ordinariness. He's just so ordinary. His strength to speak and to serve didn't come from within him, but from without, from outside of him, from God. And it is what Becky Pippert calls in Stay Salt, not the self-confidence we need to speak for Jesus more, but a God-shaped confidence where we know that we can't do it, when we know we're out beyond ourselves and yet we need God's help. And as we want to make Jesus known as people of faith, as Christians, we need that kind of confidence. This is what Nick Park, the head of Evangelical Alliance Ireland, spoke of when he was introducing his podcast on sexuality and gender. Knowing that we need a confidence to speak and engage with others in difficult subjects like this, but often that it brings out our fear and insecurity. And so he spoke of his loved pet at home, his dog, who when they were spooked and scared and bit out of character and caused harm, they snapped. And he compared this to how sometimes we as Christians share Jesus in challenging areas like sexuality and gender. We're insecure, we don't have confidence, we're scared, and so we snap out. And so Patrick can help us here, not because he gives us specific guidance on these issues, but because he has a God-shaped confidence. He's ready to speak with those who do not know Jesus. And yet, let me be bold enough to not so much imagine what Patrick might say to some of these things, but to take some of his faith and his understanding of God and to apply that to these questions today of being human. He has a strong understanding of God as creator and the beauty of his creation. And as humans, we are each created in his image, both male and female, and we know security in God's good design. We find what we are made for by looking to who God is really. But when we seek to take on the place of God, to become the creator somehow, to redraw and redesign and redefine his creation, we get ourselves out of shape. Out of shape with how things were meant to be. We end up distant from God. We end up distant from others, and even distant from a true sense of ourselves. I wonder today where you might find your identity. Could be in your job, your status, in your learning, your family, in your sense of strength or health, or it could be in your sexuality. And these different aspects of who we are can, work together to create our identity. But if any of them are the piece which we depend on to bring us true meaning and ultimate security, we're asking them to bear the weight of being God. For our ultimate and lasting identity is founded in who God is, and is the sure ground on which we can stand is on the person of Jesus, on his identity. Let me shift the picture for you from security to the sun. The light that comes from the sun meant that in Patrick's day, the life the sun gave, the sun was worshipped. But he pointed people to Jesus as light of the world, and he said, we on the other hand believe in and worship the true Son, S-U-N, Christ, who will never die, nor will the one who does his will, but he will live forever, just as Christ lives forever, this forever sun giving light. Well, if Christ is the sun, then he sheds light on our deepest questions, like our identity. Just as C.S. Lewis said, I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. So if you really want to know what you are made for, well then, get to know Jesus, who you were made for. For Christians believe that we are made by him and for him, and that we live through him. To connect in with us, if you'd like to explore more, let's pray. Let me use a prayer of Patrick, the Lorica or St. Patrick's breastplate. I arise today through the strength of heaven, light of sun, radiance of moon, splendor of fire and speed of lightning, swiftness of wind, depth of sea, stability of earth, and firmness of rock. I arise today through a mighty strength, the invocation of the Trinity, through belief in the threeness, through confession of the oneness of the Creator of creation. Yes, Lord, with Patrick, we see the great signs of your strength in this world around us. We do not worship moon or sun or lightning or wind or sea or earth or rock, and yet we do not worship them, but through them we see something of you. And we place ourselves in that world where you are our security and our strength. You, the creator of creation. And so, Lord, help us to have a sure sense of ourselves, that we might know you fully, that we might serve others freely, and that we might truly find who we are in the light of Jesus. Amen.